Hi, I'm Chris Dyer, author of The Power of Company Culture, second edition. And the best advice I ever got was to focus on my strengths and, side note, stop worrying about my weaknesses.
That's awesome. Stop worrying about your weaknesses and focus on those strengths. Chris, when did you get that advice? Who gave that to you?
This was actually years ago, and I sort of got the advice accidentally or unintentionally. What I mean by that is I kept asking all of these top speakers, top people at conferences, right? Like the creme de la creme of the people you want to learn from. And I would weasel my way up to the stage or find them somewhere and ask them a few questions so I could learn a little bit more or get a little bit better when I was coming up as a young leader. And I kept asking this question: should I worry about my weaknesses? And they always told me, yes, you should get better at what you're weak at. Yes, you should. And then my second question was, but do you do that? And it was like this light bulb went on in their head. Like they didn't realize they were giving me BS advice. Like they didn't realize they were giving me the society's advice. They were like, oh, no, I don't do that. I outsource that.
That's so awesome.
Right. And I was like, so you're saying I shouldn't worry about my weaknesses? And they're like, yeah, actually, you should focus on your strengths. And it was like I was helping them give me the advice. And it was crazy. You know what I mean? I like to challenge people when they give advice. I know there's like certain organizations where you're not allowed to give advice. You tell stories and things like that. But when you ask someone, but do you do that? It's like the world and their brain just collides, like, oh, maybe I don't do that. And why is that?
I like that. I think that's a powerful secondary question of anything you ask, right? Do you do that? Are you doing that? Because I think that's a lot of the challenge with company culture, right? Yeah. People sometimes have a good meaning idea or something, and then it's like, no, well, we don't do that here. Well, then why are you saying that? Like, why is that your value? Right. Why is that what you say culture is? So that's so cool though that you got that early on. So I'm
and if
really
anybody's
glad.
A little afraid to say, but do you do that? Because that's a little harsh, right? You could just say, how does that show up for you? How does that show up in your organization, right? Then you can say that kind of softer if you feel like you're in a bad power position, right? I mean, I'm at a point now where I'm just like, yeah, do you do that, buddy? Right? I mean, I'll give it right back to him. But if you're a young leader, you're just starting off, you might not feel that you can say it that strongly, but just, well, how does that show up for you? It's the same thing.
Oh, there you go. I like that you softened that, because that was going to be a follow-up question, because I know that a lot of times, right, the position of power, depending on the culture of the organization, is often mismatched. And I actually, that's one of the things I love most about the book here, is that we get a lot of insight here, regardless of level, that we can use to actually improve company culture. So congratulations, Chris, on writing this book.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It was actually a dream to rewrite my first book. Because when you start off, you've never done it before. You do your best you can and you figure it out. And then the moment you send it off and they say it's all done, you go, oh, I should have done this and I should have done that. No, I forgot about this. And it's like we immediately have author's regret. And so for years it was like, when they came back and said, hey, would you like to do a second edition? And I was like, yes, please. Because I doubled the size. I got rid of some stuff. I added better stuff, added new case studies. I think it's the best one I've written yet. And I'm really proud for people to check it out.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a great book, Chris. Congratulations, like I said. So let's dive in. Let's start though with the ENPS score, the employee and NPS score, Net Promoter Score. For those who don't know, right, NPS is all a scale of 1 to 10. How likely are you to refer someone to do business with somebody else? We see this all over. But the ENPS is how likely are you to say, hey, Chris, you should work with me here. This is a place to be. So why is an ENPS? Why is it so helpful for organizations as they're trying to determine their company culture?
So this really hits two parts of the book. First is I talk about the 7 pillars of what makes a great company culture. One of the pillars is measurement. So you better have ways to measure things that you find important. We don't want to measure everything. That's just exhausting and ridiculous. But we need to measure the things that matter. And it should matter to you what your employees think and whether or not they would refer their friends into work. Now, sometimes you kind of already know what that EMPS is going to say, because when you put out a job rec and nobody sends their friends over, when no one's referring anybody they know, I mean, that's kind of a subtle hint. But this is a great, like, much more holistic way to look at it. So we're measuring what matters. That's great. In the last part of the book, I talk about how to, like, get things done. And one of the big lessons is, keep it simple, stupid. Like, don't send out a 9-page survey to people. This is great because it's 0 to 10. Just pick a number. Yes, 10. You would tell everyone who could fit this job to come and go here, or 0 or anything in between. And now we have great data. So we know the simpler it is, that if you can do a 1-question type of a survey, you're typically in the 90 percentile getting people to respond, because it's like click and they're done, right? And they're going to tell you how they feel. And then we can do things to follow up. Like if you're getting bad scores, then we want to do all kinds of other things to follow up with our employees and to listen, all this stuff. But if it's great, well, then leave them alone. They don't have to fill out 19 more questions just to get the same answer.
I like that. Simpler is better, especially when you want to get more people to do that. Not just your executives who you kind of forced to, but every employee there can say, yeah, okay, I think it's a 9 or 10. That's cool. I like it. Or, yeah, not so much. Not so much. It's still anonymous, which I think is valuable. But it's not like you're not going to shoot darts at your leaders usually with an ENPS score, because It's just a number, right?
It's just a number. It's just, you're thinking about the company, I think, in general, which is different than, there's a lot of work that talks about if how you feel about your team is how you feel about your company, how you feel about your managers, typically how you feel about the CEO. I think that's Patrick Lencioni's work, if I remember correctly. And I when I first time I ever read that, it was like, yes, that's exactly what I was seeing when we would survey our people, is that, they would rate me and I would see, well, if they were really happy with their boss, they thought I was doing a good job. And that didn't mean I was doing a good job. But if they were happy with their boss, they were sort of happy with management in general, right? And the same thing with about teams. So, if we can see that there's something off there, then we can figure that out. If it's good, well, then it's good.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So let's talk about some of those other pillars, Chris, because there's a lot there. So you mentioned the measurement one, which I think is super powerful, right? You got to measure what matters, make it simple, make it easy. So give us another pillar, Chris, that a lot of people maybe aren't aware of, or maybe they don't even think about.
Probably the one that they don't think about is how to deal with mistakes. And, the other pillars, like, you hear them and you're like, okay, yeah, I need to do that. And maybe we're not so good at that, or we can work on that. It makes sense. But when I tell people the pillar that, hey, you got to be good at mistakes, they're like, wait, what? So it's sort of the only one that kind of has like a negative word in it. Everything else is like sort of positive. And so what I have to usually do is train people that there's a difference between mistakes and errors. So a mistake is, I'm trying to do the best thing that I possibly can with the information I have, the training I've been given, and I'm making a decision today to the best of my ability. I have good intentions, and I may screw it up, and I may get it wrong, and I may make the wrong decision, which my manager or my team can help me train me and help me get better, but like, based on what I know, I made the best decision possible. And when we reward people for that, when we talk to them about it and we say to them, hey, I get why you made that decision. You're 100% stand behind you. Next time it says the decision, here's the more information you didn't have, right? Here's how you get better. Here's how you grow. Here's how, you can help the company in a better way. Nobody goes home and cries to their spouse that they got yelled and screamed at today, or that, they hate their job. They're like, oh, I learned something today, right? And my boss had my back, my company had my back. And you feel like, yeah, you made a mistake, but it wasn't the end of the world. An error is somebody doesn't have the training, they don't have the aptitude, they're multitasking, they're being careless, right? The funny example I always use is like if somebody keeps miscalculating payroll, they don't know how to use a calculator, right? That's not a mistake. That's an error. Either they don't know how to do math and we need to get them out of that job, or they're like not paying attention or multitasking or whatever. And they keep, putting an extra zero on somebody's check. That's a totally different thing than a mistake. So out of that comes things like, do we have retrospectives? Do we actually, after a project, talk about what did we do well? Where could we have gotten better? Do we allow people to take chances, to take risks so they can innovate? They can make a process better. Do we tell people, here's exactly the 9,000 steps you have to do this task because that's how I would do it? Or do we say, this is what I want you to get done. If you want help, if you feel like you need more guidance, I'm here for you. But like, go figure it out. Here's some general things you might need to know, because people can come up with way better ways of doing things than maybe what I figured out, right? And then we can grow and get better as a company. So I know I've said a lot there. I'll take a breath there and a sip of coffee and let you get the next.
There you go. Yeah. No, but that's so good because what you said there is so strong. If we're outcome focused, we let the process improve. We let people do what they're best at, which often, because they're closer to it, is way better than what a leader could come up with. But the leader needs to set the direction as opposed to the exact step. I mean, where do we stop along the way? Well, that's not important for the leader to say. Certainly check in, let me know where you are, but you don't have to worry so much about that. So I think that's really strong. So why don't leaders do that more, Chris? I mean, that just seems, when you say that just seems so obvious. Like, focus on outcomes and don't micromanage the process. Why do they micromanage then?
Yeah, I think there's a few reasons, right? I mean, one is training. That maybe they didn't have a good mentor. They didn't have somebody that treated them that way, right? That's number one. Number two is their parents, their teachers, their coaches. Generally, most people are brought up, I'm going to say in America at least, in a command and control type environment, right? Do as I say because I said so. And we get it, because when you're a little kid and your parent tells you don't touch the stove, it's because they don't want you to get burned, right? Don't do that thing because I said so. They don't say, well, if you'd like to touch the stove, go right ahead and see if your hand burns off, right? And so we're sort of getting this role of like, just don't do it, right? Listen to me, don't try. And then we go to school and it's reinforced, and our coaches in sports reinforce it. And so I think most of the leadership training we get is top-down, command and control type leadership. And there are very few people, when I say few, maybe 15% of the leaders maybe are exposed to a mentor, a great coach, a great teacher. Maybe they have great parents that kind of evolve that process, and they come in naturally to the workplace having these skills. But this is what I'm hearing over and over and over again from companies when I go in and I do trainings or keynotes. Our leaders need help. They are behind. They're struggling. They don't know what to do. They're making, we want them to make great decisions, and we're not seeing that right now, right? And maybe it was the pandemic. Maybe it was something else. Maybe it's these stupid phones. It's, everyone's face all day long. I don't know, but they recognize that leaders are struggling, and so we've got to get them more help.
Yeah, definitely. More help is hopefully on the way, right? And the book will definitely get them cooking in a lot of the right directions for them. So one of the other pillars that I thought was super important, and that's one that I think is very underrated, and that's listening. Listening, we say it, but then we don't do it, and we don't reinforce it, and we don't really explain it. And we just say, well, listen. Well, I hear you, Chris. I'm listening, but you're not really listening. So talk to me about listening as you define it, and how we can help our leaders listen better to create a better culture.
So the problem with the word listening is it's a little bit misleading, because what I don't mean is that we're hearing that, it's that the other person feels heard, right? And so unfortunately I couldn't call the pillar heard, because that just sounds like we're talking about a bunch of cows or something, right? But the other person needs to feel heard. And that means you got to listen. And that means you got to do things that they feel like you heard them. Right. And so as leaders, we have to create opportunities for our people to be heard. Now, that means that we could do it in a meeting where we're specifically asking them very poignant questions. So we're getting information back. We're repeating it back to them. We're following up with them and saying, hey, this is what I heard. This is what I'm doing about it. This is how I solved this problem. Or I heard you. I tried to deal with it. Just so you know, there's not a solution right now, but like I heard you, and we'll keep working at it. Not every time someone tells us something, we can do something about it, but we can tell them we heard them. This is what we tried. I used to do a 1-question survey every week to my staff. Now, if you have a smaller team, you can do this. If you're in a huge company, you might just want to do this with your, smaller group. But 1 question a week, that's all I asked. And so 95% of the time they would respond. And it would be something like, how am I getting in your way? Or who's been killing it around here? Or if you had a magic wand, what would you change here? What resources don't you have to get your job done? Like just asking them these very poignant things. And every week they would respond. Every week I would come back to them with, this is what I heard. This is how I'm going to deal with this. Right. Or if it was a positive thing, like who's killing it, well, we would make a huge deal about everyone was saying Steve's killing it around here. How do we celebrate Steve in a really cool way? Right. Because everyone's saying he's killing it for us. So that's another way of institutionalizing. Do you have a regular survey process? You talked about the employment NPS, right? Do you have that in place? What are the mechanisms you have to make sure it's happening? Are you showing them you're listening? Are you following up and responding? Because guess what? As a leader, you can't just say it once. You're probably going to have to say it 3, 4, 5 times on Slack, in email, in person. And I have a lot of leaders say, that's exhausting. That's just so much. And I'm like, welcome to leadership, right? Say it again and again and again and repeat it. If it's important, keep talking about it, keep telling them, let them keep, feeling like they're being heard. So you're right. Listening is so key. Now I'm not going to go deep into this, but like listening isn't just hearing your employees. It's hearing your clients. It's hearing your vendors. It's hearing your stakeholders. It's hearing everybody else in the ecosystem of the company you have, right? Are you set up to hear from every angle to make sure your organization is moving in the right direction?
Yeah. Wow. Definitely should have called that heard then, because that is it, right? I mean, ultimately that's it. And I like the fact that it's not just hearing, but also reporting back that you heard, and also showing that progress towards perhaps what you're doing about that. Because often, surveys go into a black hole. It's like the old suggestion box with the empty bottom. It's like they just go right in the garbage can. I mean, it's nice. You say that you value feedback. You say that you hear your employees, but then you don't do anything about it. So I think reporting progress back, and then the multi-channel approach there, Chris, so valuable, right? Slack and in person and on Zoom and in town halls and all of this stuff. And I'm as you're talking, I'm thinking about organizations where I heard this, or maybe didn't hear this, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that's why I like to work there so much, or that's why I was challenged so much with there. And I think each of us, as we're hearing you, I think should think about, okay, so if I'm a leader, how do I do this? How do I make sure that I do this? So Chris, how do we? Is there a way to get feedback that we are hearing them? Is that a survey question, or how do we do that?
Well, I mean, listen, there are lots of different ways that we can do this. And I would say if a leader really wants to do this in a simple way, listen for what your people are saying in meetings about where they're getting stuck or having issues or being frustrated. Let's just say that you are working with a sales team and you said, hey, everybody, let's go call the 10 clients that are most likely on your pipeline to close this month. Let's really give them some attention. Let's go out and figure out how we get these contracts moved, right? And that's on Monday. And on Tuesday, you come back and your salespeople didn't get it done. Or let's just say like one person didn't get it done. They didn't even try. They didn't get the list done. Now, you could yell and scream and get angry and whatever, or say, try again next time. But that's an opportunity to say, hey, let's use Steve again. Hey, Steve, so what happened? What's going on? And as you start to ask a few more questions, you may find out Steve's like really overworked. He's got a ton of stuff going on. Maybe he's got a new baby at home. Maybe he's got a puppy and the dumb puppy was barking all night in its cage because they're caged. I mean, whatever the thing is, and now Steve's exhausted. He's not quite himself. As a leader, the way you show them that you heard them is not to say, "Oh, sorry about that, Steve." It's to say, "I see your challenge. You're hurting. There's something going on here. Can anyone help Steve out? Can anyone pick up the slack? Maybe is there any way we can help him with some of these other tasks so he can get this other thing done? Who can?" And like always, someone on the team like, "Oh, I can do that thing for him. I can help Steve out." Right? Or some of those contacts, I was on that call with them. I could do the follow up on those 3. Right? He feels heard. Not because I said, "I heard you, Steve," but because we did something to actually help him with whatever it is he was saying. So we took the information and we did something. We created an action. How can we help you? Right? Now, listen, we go 2 weeks and Steve still hasn't made those phone calls. We're going to be talking about something else where, he may not be working here very long. But, if he's a good employee and we're generally fine, but we see a sudden shift and a change, how do I show them I care? How do I show them that, we're going to help you be great when in this moment you're struggling?
Wow. So part of listening, then part of hearing your employees is paying attention, and part of it is absolutely responding to what's there and helping find solutions instead of yelling and making it so that they start tuning you out. Am I hearing that right, Chris?
Absolutely.
Awesome. So, well, there's so many tips inside the book. Congratulations, folks. Before I ask the kind of wrap up question here, I encourage folks, if you want to get a better culture, go get a copy of Chris's book. Go to chrisdyer.com, CHRISDYER.com. Get a copy of The Power of Company Culture. It's a powerful book. Lots of great pillars in there. Lots of stuff we could talk about. But Chris, if folks want to get started on this journey of creating that culture, and let's say they're a frontline leader and the organization is too big for them to affect everything, how do they get started with their team so that they can start building that culture that people say, heck yeah, this is where I want to work? I'm going to say 9 or 10 in that ENPS score.
Well, the simple answer is just to start. Right? So many leaders that I meet that say they want to do this and they're not sure and they really want to make a change. And I'll ask them, okay, what's the last thing you did? And they don't know. Right? They feel so overwhelmed. They feel imposter syndrome. They don't know where to start, so they don't start. I mean, it's a lot like exercise, right? We can all say we want to get in better shape and we have all these exercise plans and we're going to do this diet and then like we don't do anything. And it's like, yeah, you go outside and you see your neighbor walking up and down that street every morning. Just go do something. Just start, right? So start is number 1. Number 2 is ask your people. Ask them what they need. What is for our team, for our little subculture here? What does great look like to you? What do you need, right? And that it's going to be a little different. Every group's going to have a little bit different priority. They might say, I really want to know more about what's happening. I want more transparency about what's going on. If you could let me know what the company's thinking, feeling, how we're doing, that would help me. You might get, like, listen, can we cut down the meetings? Like, I got so much freaking work. Like, can you just leave me alone? Like, I'm happy to be on our stand-up and like fill you in, but like, then I want to shut my door and get my stuff done. Right. I've had those teams that just like leave me the F alone was basically their answer. And the more you left them alone, the better they did. Right. I mean, you do the minimum stuff, but like they didn't want to be on 900 meetings all day. It just depends. So talk to them about what they need. What does good look like for them? That's really, really key. And then the third part to get started is just to keep checking in to say, how are we doing? Right? Is this working? How are we doing? Um, the other sort of the last thing I would say, and this is a point that I make in the book a few times, when you look at the pillars that I presented, and if you read them and you go, geez, Chris is right. This is the correct thing to do, which you may or may not do. But if you look at this and say these 7 pillars are the right areas to focus on, you're going to identify at least one or more pillars where you suck. Your company's bad at, or your team is bad at. That's where you start. Don't make the mistake of being like, well, it could be a little bit better transparency, and you put all this fluff and pop and circumstance around getting a little bit better at this one thing that doesn't doesn't change anything, right? People are going to see you doing all this stuff, and it's like, well, we got a 0.5% better, and I want the small improvements. But if you look at, geez, we're really bad at dealing with mistakes, we're really bad at that, that's where you start, right? You got to go hit that hard, and people will see a big improvement, and they'll get a lot happier, and things will get a lot better. And then the next time you come around and want to focus on something, they're going to be on board and ready to do it because they saw, geez, we focused on this one area and we got way better, right? So if you got 50% better at dealing with mistakes versus a 0.5% better at transparency, how much better is your company going to be, or your team, or whatever that is?
Yeah, go for the big win that you can get, because that will create momentum. That'll move that flywheel. That'll get you closer to that. And then listen, right? Pay attention, listen, keep going. I love that, Chris. Really, really awesome stuff. So again, folks, go to chrisdyer.com, get to know Chris more, get yourself a copy of The Power of Company Culture. And as Chris said, just get started. Just get started. Great stuff, Chris. Thanks so much, my friend. I really appreciate it.
Thanks as always, Phil. Appreciate you having me on.
My pleasure.